When you get old, you hold on to the promises your children make. My daughter swore she would take care of me, that I would always have a place in her home. I believed her, trusted her, even gave her control of things I should have kept for myself. But one night, I opened the door to my own bedroom and found strangers sleeping in my bed. My daughter hadn't cared for me at all. She had rented out my room for money. She thought I was powerless, too old to fight back. What she didn't know was that her betrayal would be the key to her own destruction, and my revenge would make sure she never forgot it. My name is Lillian Cotta, and I am 81 years old. My hands are weathered from years of work, and my back aches when I bend too long, but my mind is sharp. Sharper, I think, than my daughter ever gave me credit for. I wasn't always like this, dependent on others. I worked as a seamstress for 30 years, made every stitch with pride, raised my daughter Rebecca, after her father died too young. Everything I had went to her, my love, my time, my money, even my dreams. I thought if I gave her everything, she'd give me kindness in return when I grew old. That was the promise she made. When I could no longer manage the stairs in my own house, Rebecca looked at me with soft eyes and said, "Mom, come live with us. You'll always have a home here. I'll take care of you." It broke my heart to leave my little home behind, but her promise comforted me. I moved into her house, carrying only a few boxes and my late husband's photograph. Rebecca helped me set up a small room in her home. She said it was mine. She said I'd never have to worry again. For a while, things were fine. We ate dinners together, I helped her children with homework, and I thought maybe, just maybe, this was how family was supposed to be. But people change when money whispers in their ear. It started small. Rebecca grew distant. She'd sigh when I asked for help with groceries, snap when I left the television too loud. Then she began locking the thermostat, complaining about expenses. I told myself it was just stress, that she still cared. Then came the night that shattered everything. I had gone to bed early, the house quiet. At least, I thought it was quiet. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of voices. Laughter, footsteps, doors opening and closing. I assumed it was the kids sneaking around, so I shuffled down the hall to check. When I opened the door to my room, I froze. There in my bed, the bed Rebecca had promised was mine, were two young strangers. A couple, maybe in their 20s, sprawled across the blankets, their backpacks thrown on the floor. A half-eaten pizza box sat on my nightstand. My nightstand. The young man sat up, startled. "Oh, sorry, we booked this room. Thought it was available." "Booked this room?" My voice trembled. The girl giggled nervously. "On Airbnb. Rebecca's listing. She said it was fine." My heart stopped. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking, my chest tight. I walked down the hall to Rebecca's bedroom and knocked hard. She opened the door, bleary-eyed, annoyed. "What is it, Mom?" she snapped. I pointed down the hall, my voice breaking. "There are strangers, in my room. In my bed." Rebecca didn't flinch. She didn't apologize. She rolled her eyes. "Oh, that. Don't make a scene. We needed extra income. You'll be fine on the couch for a few nights." On the couch. That was the moment I realized my daughter hadn't invited me into her home to care for me. She had invited me because I was useful, until I wasn't. My room, my space, my dignity, she had sold them to strangers for a few $100s. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, the streetlight glowing through the window, listening to the laughter of those strangers in my bed. My daughter's words replayed in my head, "You'll be fine." No, I wasn't fine. I was betrayed. And betrayal, at my age, doesn't break you. It hardens you. The next morning, Rebecca acted as if nothing happened. She brewed coffee, chatted on the phone, laughed with her husband. She looked at me sitting on the couch and smirked. "Don't pout, Mom. You're still welcome here. Just, don't expect the world to revolve around you." Her words stung worse than the strangers. I said nothing. I ate my breakfast in silence. But as I watched her, a new feeling stirred inside me. Not grief. Not anger. Something colder. Something sharper. Because Rebecca thought she had one. She thought I was too old, too weak, too dependent to fight back. She thought she could rent out my dignity for pocket money and I'd have no choice but to endure it. But she forgot who raised her. She forgot the woman who stitched dresses for 20 years to pay her college tuition. She forgot the woman who fought debt collectors after her father's death, who kept the roof over her head when the world wanted to take it away. She forgot I was stronger than she ever knew. That night, while she slept, I pulled out the small metal box I had kept hidden in my suitcase. Inside were documents Rebecca had never seen, papers for my husband's estate, the deed to the house I had given up, and something else she didn't know existed. A legal clause. A loophole in the agreement when I moved in. My lips curled into the faintest smile. Because Rebecca thought she had stripped me of everything. But she had overlooked the one thing that could destroy her. And I was patient enough to wait for the right moment to use it. If you've ever felt like a stranger in your own family, then you know the sting that lived in my chest after that night. I thought nothing could hurt more than walking into my bedroom and finding strangers sleeping in my bed. But I was wrong. The worst part wasn't the strangers, it was Rebecca. The way she looked at me the next morning, her voice dripping with annoyance, as though I was the intruder in her home. It didn't stop there. Rebecca began treating me as if my presence was temporary, inconvenient. She told her friends openly about how she was managing Mom, and how at least the room makes money when she doesn't need it. She said those words in front of me as though I were invisible. I sat in the corner of the living room knitting, her words stabbing with every syllable. I wanted to ask her, what happened to the promise you made? What happened to family? But my pride stopped me. I would not beg for the kindness that should have come freely. Days turned into weeks. I began to notice a pattern. Strangers came and went constantly. Business travelers with suitcases. College students with laptops. Tourists with cameras slung over their necks. My room, had become a revolving door of people who didn't know my name, who barely looked at me, who often left the house messier than they found it. One evening, I walked into the kitchen to pour myself a cup of tea. A young man I had never seen before was leaning against the counter, scrolling on his phone. He glanced up and asked casually, "Oh, are you the maid?" The cup nearly slipped from my hands. I steadied myself, my face burning with shame. Maid. In my daughter's home. Rebecca walked in just in time to hear. She laughed. She actually laughed. No, that's just my mom. She keeps to herself. Just my mom. The humiliation was sharp, but it was also clarifying. Because at that moment, I understood, Rebecca no longer saw me as her mother. I was a placeholder. A body taking up space. An extra piece of furniture she could move around as she pleased. I did not cry. Not in front of them. Instead, I began watching. Listening. Writing things down. I kept a small notebook hidden beneath the cushion of the armchair where I sat most evenings. Every stranger's name, every date they arrived, every night I spent on the couch while someone else slept in my bed. I wrote it all down. I snapped photographs on my old phone, the pizza boxes left on my nightstand, the suitcases stacked in the hallway, the rental listings Rebecca posted online under her profile. She thought I was senile. She thought my silence was weakness. But silence can be a weapon sharper than any sword when wielded by the right hand. And then one afternoon, while Rebecca was out shopping, I pulled out the documents from my metal box again. The deed to the home I had left behind, my home, and the clause for my husband's estate. My late husband, God rest his soul, had been cautious. He had known that Rebecca was ambitious, sometimes too ambitious for her own good. When he died, he made sure the house wasn't signed away completely. There was a stipulation. If I, his widow, were ever mistreated or displaced, I retained the right to revoke any living arrangement made in good faith. Rebecca didn't know about that clause. She had never read the fine print. But I had. And as I traced my finger along the lines of that legal document, I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because the house I had given up? It wasn't hers to control. It was still mine, legally. That night, Rebecca returned home in high spirits. She had a shopping bag in one hand and a wide grin on her face. Guess what, Mom? I've listed the guest room too. With both spaces, we can make double. Isn't that wonderful? Wonderful, I repeated softly, forcing a smile. She didn't notice the steel in my voice. She didn't notice the way I held her gaze a moment longer than usual. But I noticed something in her. The greed had grown bolder. She wasn't content with one room. She wanted the whole house under her control. And I knew what came next, the slow push to move me out altogether. I sat in silence as she chatted about the extra income, already planning how she would spend it. A vacation. A new car. More handbags. Not once did she mention saving for her children's future, or making life easier for me. No, every word was about her. When she went to bed, I pulled my notebook out again. I wrote down every word she said, every promise she broke. Because one day soon, all of this, the notes, the photos, the documents, would come together like threads in a tapestry. And that tapestry would strangle her arrogance. The next morning, Rebecca's husband, Brian, stopped me in the kitchen. He was a quiet man, balding, with a permanent look of exhaustion. He glanced over his shoulder before whispering, "I'm sorry about all this, Evelyn. I told her it wasn't right. But she doesn't listen to me." I looked at him carefully. His voice trembled, but his eyes were sincere. "Do you love her?" I asked. He nodded. "Yes. But I don't agree with what she's doing." That was when I realized he could be an ally. Quiet, perhaps powerless in his own way, but an ally nonetheless. And allies, no matter how small, are invaluable in war. That evening, Rebecca confronted me again. "Mom, I need you to start moving your things out of the closet. The new guests complained there's not enough space." Her words were casual, dismissive. But in my ears, they were the toll of a bell. She wasn't renting my room anymore. She was erasing me from it. I said nothing. I nodded, picked up my teacup, and sipped slowly. But as I swallowed, I felt the fire in my chest grow hotter, brighter. Because Rebecca thought she was in control. She had no idea the walls of her little empire were already crumbling. And when they fell, they would bury her. There's a kind of silence that follows betrayal. It isn't peaceful. It's heavy, sharp, like the air before a thunderstorm. That silence lived with me after Rebecca told me to clear my things from the closet for her paying guests. Every morning I folded my sweaters into boxes, not because I had to, but because I wanted her to believe she was winning. She thought I was shrinking. What she didn't know was that I was gathering strength. The legal clause for my husband's estate wouldn't leave my mind. I had read it a dozen times already, but one evening I sat at my little desk with a magnifying glass and read it again, line by line. The widow of Charles Carter retains full and irrevocable rights to all family property, including but not limited to the primary residence, in the event of mistreatment, displacement, or financial exploitation. Mistreatment, displacement, financial exploitation. Rebecca had committed all three. My heart raced as I realized the truth. The house wasn't hers. Not truly. It was mine. Mine to protect, mine to reclaim if she dared cross the line. And she had crossed it the night she sold my room to strangers. The next morning, I tucked the papers into my handbag and walked to the bus stop. Rebecca thought I was going for groceries. Instead, I rode across town to Henry Blake's office, the lawyer who had handled Charles's affairs years ago. Henry was an old friend, a man in his 70s with silver hair and sharp eyes. When I walked into his office, he rose from his chair with a warm smile. "Evelyn, it's been too long." I placed the papers on his desk, my hands trembling slightly. "Henry, I need you to tell me if this still holds." He read carefully, his brows furrowing. When he finished, he looked up at me, his voice steady. "It holds. Your husband was meticulous. Rebecca has no legal claim over you, or over this property, as long as you invoke this clause." I leaned back in my chair, my chest rising with relief and fire. "So if I wanted, I could take the house back?" Henry nodded. "You could. More than that, if she's profiting off your displacement, renting your room, pushing you out, it could qualify as financial exploitation. That strengthens your case." I closed my eyes for a moment. I could almost hear Charles's voice. "I told you, Evelyn, I'd never leave you without protection." Henry's voice broke through my thoughts. "Do you want to pursue this legally now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. Let her dig deeper. Let her think she's untouchable. When the time comes, I want her arrogance to be the rope she hangs herself with." Henry studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've grown sharper with age, Evelyn. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," I said. But inside I thought, careful, yes. Patient, absolutely. But merciful? No. When I returned home that afternoon, Rebecca was on the phone in the living room, her voice loud and animated. I paused in the hallway to listen. Yes, it's been great money. Honestly, we're thinking of listing the whole house when Mom finally goes into a nursing home. It's such a waste of space with her here. I mean, she barely does anything. Just sits around. At least now she's useful, sort of. Her words hit me like a slap. A nursing home. That was her plan. Move me out, rent the entire house, and live off the profits while I rotted away in some sterile room with strangers. I gripped the strap of my handbag until my knuckles turned white. She didn't notice me. She never noticed me anymore. To her, I was already fading, already disposable. But I was listening. And I was planning. The days that followed blurred into a cycle of humiliation. Strangers knocking on the door at midnight. Loud music echoing down the hall. My belongings shoved into boxes and stacked in the garage. Rebecca scolding me for hovering when I dared step into the kitchen while guests cooked. Once, I overheard one of the renters whisper, "She's still here?" I thought the ad said the owner's mom wasn't around anymore. Rebecca laughed. Don't mind her. She's harmless. Think of it like a bed and breakfast, with an extra old lady wandering around. The guests laughed with her. I retreated to the couch, my face burning, my heart heavy. But inside that heaviness was steel. Because every word she said, every insult, every careless laugh, I wrote it all down. My notebook was filling quickly now, pages dense with evidence. One night, Brian, her husband, found me writing. He hesitated, then sat beside me on the couch. Evelyn, I don't agree with what she's doing. I don't know how to stop her. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the guilt etched into his tired face. Brian, do you love this house? I asked. He blinked. Of course. It's where our kids are growing up. Then protect it, I said softly. Because if Rebecca keeps on this path, she won't just lose me. She'll lose everything. His eyes widened, but he said nothing. He just nodded once and left me to my writing. That night, I tucked the notebook into my box with the estate papers. My weapons were gathering. Rebecca thought I was powerless. But she was wrong. The law was on my side. The truth was on my side. And soon, everyone else would be too. Because the more she rented, the more careless she became. And I was patient. Patient enough to wait for the moment her greed would hand me the final piece I needed to destroy her. If patience were a blade, mine was sharpened to a razor's edge. By now, I had enough evidence to ruin Rebecca. Photos, notes, recordings of conversations she didn't realize I could hear. But revenge is not only about what you do. It's about when you do it. And I wanted the timing to sting. Rebecca was growing careless, greedy. She began treating the house less like a family home and more like a hotel. The front door constantly opened and shut, a parade of strangers dragging luggage across the hardwood floors. My once quiet evenings of tea and knitting were replaced with a pounding bass of music upstairs, laughter spilling down the staircase at midnight, cigarette smoke wafting in from the porch. When I complained, Rebecca waved me off. Mom, don't exaggerate. It's just a few guests. You should be grateful. Their rent is keeping this house afloat. I wanted to laugh at her hypocrisy. Keeping this house afloat? The house wasn't hers to keep afloat. It was mine, whether she admitted it or not. But instead of fighting back, I smiled faintly and said, "You're right, dear. You know best." Those 5 words were the perfect disguise. They lulled her into a false sense of control. Soon she listed the guest room permanently, then the basement, and finally she joked, half-joked I thought, about renting the garage as a budget studio. The greed had spread like a disease, and she couldn't stop feeding it. The worst came one afternoon when she stormed into the living room, her heels clicking against the floor. "Mom," she said sharply, "I need you to move your boxes from the garage. The new tenant's complaining there isn't enough space." I set my knitting needles down, my face calm though my blood boiled inside me. "My boxes? You mean my belongings?" "Yes," she said, rolling her eyes. "You don't even use them. It's just clutter. You don't need half that junk anyway." Clutter. That junk included my husband's war medals, old family photographs, and the quilts I had stitched when Rebecca was a child. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply nodded, my silence wrapping around me like armor. But that night, when the house was quiet, I unlocked the garage and retrieved the most important box, the one with the deed, the estate clause, and my notebook. I carried it back to my room, clutching it close. If Rebecca wanted my memories gone, she'd have to do more than push them aside. Meanwhile, my notebook was filling faster than ever. I documented every guest who entered the house. Their names, their payment methods, their complaints. I even found her listings online, under her name, bold as brass. Charming family home near downtown, cozy bedrooms available. My stomach turned as I read the reviews. Lovely host, though the old lady in the house was a bit odd. Room was fine, but felt strange having the owner's mother around. She seemed out of place. Out of place. In my own home. But each review, each listing, each careless screenshot I saved became another thread in the noose she was tying for herself. I returned to Henry, my lawyer, with the growing pile of evidence. He leafed through it, his frown deepening. "Evelyn," he said gravely, "this isn't just exploitation. This is fraud. She's renting without permits, without declaring income. If you file this, it will ruin her." I looked him in the eye, my voice steady. "That's the point." Henry sat back in his chair. "She won't see this coming." "No," I agreed. "And that's what makes it satisfying." Over the following weeks, I let Rebecca believe she was untouchable. I even helped with laundry once or twice when guests demanded fresh towels. She smirked, mistaking my compliance for weakness. "See, Mom? This isn't so bad. You're part of something useful." Useful. That word stung more than any insult. But I kept smiling. Smiling while she cooked meals for strangers and ignored me at the dinner table. Smiling while she counted her cash in the kitchen, her fingers greedy, her laughter ringing hollow. Even Brian began to wilt under her ambition. One night, as she prepared for yet another guest's arrival, he muttered, "Rebecca, this is getting out of hand. It doesn't even feel like our home anymore." Rebecca snapped back, "Don't be dramatic. This is income. Without it, we'd have nothing." I saw his eyes flicker toward me, guilt heavy in his gaze. But I didn't need his pity. I had my plan. Because Rebecca wasn't content with renting rooms. She had bigger dreams. I overheard her one evening on the phone. "Yes, we're considering listing the whole house next month. Mom will be moving to a nursing home soon. Once she's out, it'll be so much easier to manage." A nursing home. She was already making plans, deciding my fate without a single word to me. I sat in the darkened hallway, my fists clenched, listening to her laughter. She thought she had the power to discard me like furniture. But she didn't know the trap was already set. The paperwork was ready. The evidence was stacked. The lawyer was on standby. All I needed was for Rebecca to make one final arrogant move, the kind of move that would show everyone exactly who she was. And she was already planning it. Because tucked inside her purse, I glimpsed a brochure she tried to hide. A glossy pamphlet with bold letters across the top, "Luxury Senior Living, Comfort and Care for Your Loved Ones." It wasn't care. It was exile. She wanted to ship me off, rent the house entirely, and live like a queen on stolen dignity. But she didn't realize, the queen was still me. And soon everyone, from her husband to her children to the strangers she invited into my home, would know the truth. Because her little empire was about to collapse, and I would be the one to set fire to the match. When someone believes they're untouchable, that's when they're closest to their fall. Rebecca strutted through the house these days like a landlord, clipboard in hand, reminding guests about checkout times and barking at me to keep out of sight. She spoke with investors on the phone, already talking about scaling her business. Business. My room, my dignity, my silence, she turned them into transactions. But what she didn't know was that her grand finale was already written, and I was the author. The opportunity came at a Sunday family dinner. She had insisted on hosting, eager to show off her success. "It's good for the image," she said, preening in front of the mirror as she fixed her lipstick. Relatives gathered around the dining table, my nieces, cousins, even Rebecca's in-laws. The table was set beautifully, candles flickering, wine glasses filled. Rebecca wore a silk blouse and a diamond pendant, her laughter sharp as she regaled everyone with tales of her entrepreneurship. "Can you believe it?" she said proudly. "This house pays for itself now. Airbnb has been such a blessing." There was laughter, nods, even admiration. Then her cousin asked casually, "But isn't it hard with your mom living here too?" Rebecca's lips curved into that cruel little smirk I knew too well. "Oh, don't worry about her. Mom's adaptable. Besides, she's moving into a senior home soon, so we'll have even more space to rent." The table chuckled politely. My hands trembled in my lap. But I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I waited. When the plates were cleared, I rose slowly from my chair. My bones ached, but my voice was steady. "May I say something?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to me. Rebecca leaned back, sipping her wine, certain I would mutter something harmless. Instead, I placed a thick folder on the table. The sound echoed like a gavel. "I've listened to enough," I said softly. "It's time you all heard the truth." Rebecca frowned. "Mom, don't start." But I cut her off. "This house is not Rebecca's to rent. It never was. When Charles passed, he left a clause in the estate that gave me irrevocable rights to this property. This house is mine. Legally. And every rental, every listing, every dollar she's taken has been illegal." Gasps rippled around the table. Brian's fork clattered against his plate. Rebecca's face drained of color. "That's not true," she shouted, her voice shrill. "She's confused, she doesn't understand." I opened the folder and pulled out the documents one by one. The deed, the clause, the rental listings I had printed, screenshots of her Airbnb profile with glowing reviews that mentioned me like I was a ghost haunting my own home. "Do I look confused?" I asked, my eyes boring into hers. The silence was deafening. Her relatives exchanged shocked glances. Brian buried his face in his hands. I turned to the others. She promised to care for me. Instead, she sold my room to strangers. Treated me like clutter. Told me I belonged in a nursing home so she could fill this place with tourists and cash. A murmur spread across the table. "That's awful. I can't believe it. How could she do that to her own mother?" Rebecca's face twisted with fury. "You're ruining me," she hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined yourself." I gathered the documents, tucking them back into the folder. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. This house is mine again. The guests will be gone within the month. And as for you, Rebecca," I let the words hang in the air, heavy and deliberate. "You'll learn what it feels like to lose the roof over your head." Her jaw dropped. "You can't." But I could. And I would. The dinner ended in chaos. Relatives whispered as they left, shaking their heads. Rebecca stormed off to her room, slamming the door. Brian lingered behind, his voice low as he said to me, I didn't know it had gone this far. I'm sorry, Evelyn." I nodded, my expression softening just slightly. "You don't need to be sorry, Brian. But she will." That night, as I sat in the quiet of my reclaimed room, I ran my fingers along the edge of my notebook. This had only been the beginning. Public humiliation was necessary, but it wasn't enough. Rebecca still thought she could talk her way out of this. That maybe, somehow, she could repair her reputation, convince people I was exaggerating. But she hadn't seen the rest of what I had gathered, the bank transfers, the unreported income, the taxes she hadn't paid. No, she thought losing the house was her greatest fear. She hadn't realized the worst was still coming. Because my final strike wouldn't just evict her. It would strip her bare. The night after the family dinner, the house was heavy with silence. Rebecca didn't come out of her room. The children tiptoed around, sensing the storm. Brian moved quietly, guilt written all over his face. But me? I slept soundly for the first time in months, in my own bed. My room. My sheets. My pillows. The air felt lighter, as if the house itself remembered who it truly belonged to. Rebecca avoided me the next morning, her voice sharp when she finally spoke. "You embarrassed me. In front of everyone. Do you know how hard it will be to undo this?" I looked at her calmly over my teacup. "Rebecca, you can't undo the truth." Her eyes flashed. "I'll fix it. I'll tell people you're confused, that you misunderstood. They'll believe me. I leaned forward slightly, my voice soft but steady. Then I suppose it's time I show them the rest. She frowned. The rest. I rose from the table, went to my closet, and returned with a second folder. This one was thicker, heavier. I set it down in front of her. I've documented every dollar you made renting my room. Every guest, every listing, every payment. None of it declared. None of it legal. Do you know what that means? Her face paled as she flipped through the pages, screenshots of her online listings, bank transfers, even reviews from guests. Her hands shook. Tax fraud, I said calmly. Illegal subletting. Financial exploitation of a dependent adult. Do you think the IRS will laugh it off the way you did when you called me cheap? Do you think the courts will ignore the fact that you shoved your mother onto a couch while you sold her bed to strangers? Rebecca's voice cracked. You wouldn't. You wouldn't do that to your own daughter. I stared at her, my expression unreadable. You already did worse to your mother. All I'm doing is showing the world who you are. Tears filled her eyes. For the first time, I saw fear, real fear, break through her arrogance. She reached out, but I pulled the folder back before she could touch it. You thought you were clever, I continued, my voice rising just slightly. You thought I was too old, too weak, too dependent to fight back. But you forgot, I raised you. And I know every greedy, careless impulse you have. You betrayed me, Rebecca. You sold my dignity for rent money. And now you will pay the price. She sobbed, whispering, Please, Mom, don't destroy me. But I had no pity left to give. Over the following weeks, the hammer fell. Henry filed the paperwork, reporting her unlicensed rentals and undeclared income. Letters arrived from city officials, inquiries from tax authorities. Her reputation, already cracked from the family dinner, shattered completely. Friends distanced themselves. Relatives whispered. Guests stopped booking. Brian, weary and ashamed, eventually packed his bags and took the children to his parents' house, unable to stomach the mess Rebecca had made. And Rebecca? She was left alone in a house that was no longer hers, her name blackened, her accounts under investigation. I reclaimed every inch of space. My photos went back on the walls. My quilts returned to my closet. My husband's medals hung proudly once more. The house was mine again, not just legally, but spiritually. One evening, as I sat by the fireplace with a cup of tea, I heard the creak of footsteps behind me. Rebecca stood there, her once perfect hair disheveled, her eyes red from crying. You've ruined me, she whispered. I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. No, Rebecca. You ruined yourself. I just showed the world what you did. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. She knew. Deep down she knew. I leaned back in my chair, the firelight warming my face. You promised to care for me. Instead, you rented out my room to strangers. And for that, you lost everything. Let it be a lesson you'll never forget. She turned away, shoulders slumped, and left the room. That night, I sat alone, staring into the flames, the weight of betrayal finally lifting. I had been humiliated, dismissed, erased. But I had not been broken. I had fought back. I had taken back what was mine. And I had won. For the first time in a long time, I felt peace. I whispered into the quiet, as if speaking to Charles. They thought I was powerless. But in the end, it was my silence that destroyed her. And I smiled, because it was true.